Are we rolling, Sparks? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, Commissioner. Good morning. Welcome. This is going to be a slightly different meeting today because we haven't got time. Unfortunately, George has to go at 11:30, and when he goes, we are not quorate, so we have to close the meeting. So no flannel, please. I'm going to have to. Heavens forbid. I'm going to have to alter the beginning to cut it right down because the main item of this is the Principal Officer's Local Pay Award, for which most of you will be turfed out anyway. So let's just, I have to read out the welcoming broadcast statement. Welcome to this meeting of Hampshire Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Authority. This meeting is being held at our Fire and Police Shared Headquarters at Eastleigh. The meeting is being recorded and broadcast on the authority's website and will be available for repeated viewings. The press and members of the public are also permitted to film and broadcast this meeting. Those remaining at the meeting are consenting to being filmed and recorded and to the possible use of those images and recording for broadcasting purposes. There is no fire alarm. In the event of alarm, out there, turn left into the car park and follow someone in uniform. Microphones, you know how they work. Please switch it off when not being used because it saps the power. Item 1, apologies for absence. Adam, please.
We have apologies from Councillor Goodfellow and Councillor Lucioni.
Yep. Any declarations of interest? Nope. Are you happy with the minutes of the previous meeting? Great. I can then sign them afterwards. Any deputations? Nope. There are some chairman's announcements, but I will forego those except for just a bit about the HMI inspection. The service ran 3 inspections, started on the 20th of January 25 and has seen His Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services in service carrying out field work for a period of 7 weeks. In that time, they met many teams and individuals, myself included. The fieldwork part of the inspection is now finished and HMI will begin writing the report, which we can expect to receive during the summer. The inspection period is really valuable for us and the service, and that I know a lot of effort has been made to prepare us for it. I would like to extend my thanks to everyone who's taken part, whether it's being interviewed or desktop exercises. Your time and efforts to speak to the inspectors is very much appreciated. Quick bit about whole-time firefighters. We had a total of 1,722 applications, which is the highest we've had in recent years, and the SIF programme has produced 179 candidates progressing to the next stage. Members' developments, we'll do that some other time. So, moving on to the first paper, item 7, on page 1 of your paperwork, I would ask, which is Health and Safety Statement of Intent, I would ask Matt to introduce this, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members. This report seeks approval for the Fire Authority's Health and Safety Statement of Intent for the financial year 2025 to 26. The Statement of Intent is an annual document and it sets out the commitment to provide the highest level of health and safety for all our employees and others who may be affected by our work. The Statement of Intent, if approved, is then signed by the Fire Authority Chair and the Chief Fire Officer. The Statement of Intent from last year has been reviewed and there are no proposed changes made to it. So the document at Appendix A is the same as the current year just lapsed. But it's there for your consideration and approval today. Thank you.
Members, any questions you wish to raise? Yes, please.
Thank you very much for that. Obviously no changes. I was just wondering if there was anything that had happened that made you think about any changes that you might have put in but chose not to, just to try and get a sense of what we might have done, but said no, actually it's fine.
Yeah, no, nothing noteworthy to raise with you. So no, we've reviewed it and we actively monitor and evaluate our compliance against it routinely throughout the year through various boards and right up to exec group. But there's nothing that's triggered a need to change it.
Thank you.
Any other points members wish to raise? No? Okay, well, if I can go to the recommendation, which is that the Health and Safety Statement of Intent 25-26 be approved by the full authority. Agree? Agree? Okay, thank you. Moving on then to item 8, which is the authority contract standing orders update. Paul, before I ask you to present this, we've had a discussion. It seems a bit archaic that this meeting can be ground to a halt because some people aren't here. Can we have a look, please, at substitutes and what's set in the... If we had substitutes, we wouldn't be in this position. Can we look at that later?
Yeah.
Thank you. Now, all yours, Paul.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, members. The paper deals with amendments to contract standing orders, and as you'll all know, contract standing orders are the bit of the Constitution that governs procurement and the award of contracts to buy goods and services, so they ensure we comply with our statutory obligations and with appropriate governance. Parliament passed a new Procurement Act which came into force at the end of February, and that changes some of those statutory obligations. So it means we've got to update contract standing orders to reflect those changes. And the changes brought about they're fairly significant, but they don't actually alter that many of the underlying fundamental concepts. There's quite a shift in language, a change to the way certain things are described terminology-wise, as well as some minor changes to specific processes. And the paper sets out in some detail in the table at paragraph 8 what those changes are. And then there's an updated version of contract standing orders at Appendix 1. And the paper asks for your approval for that so that we can then add that into the Constitution. So I think that's all I need to say, but happy to take any questions.
Let me just move my breakfast. Yeah, sorry, Paul. I'll start again. At the last A&G meeting, Ernst Young presented their annual report. Absolutely fantastic. It was excellent. Really value for money. Everything about us was good. But in the discrepancies, they did raise some issues, which I chose not to raise on the day, as it materially there weren't that much involved, but the volume of discrepancies was quite high. Contract orders, this is fine. I have no difficulty with that, but it's the interpretation of who's handling the payments and the link with the contract orders that is of some concern. I did ask that this would be looked into by Catherine and by Penny Knowles, but I'd just like it brought into the contract order statement as well.
Okay, thanks for that. I think Catherine may be able to comment on that.
Sorry, yeah. So I think the discrepancies, so I think there were areas where control could be improved, but none of them related specifically to procurement or contracts. They were more to do with sort of financial administration. So I think there were two prime areas. One of them was to do with people's access to transact within the system, where in some cases there was some access people had which maybe it wasn't appropriate for them to have. So it was clear that none of that access had been used or caused any issues, but that would have, it is a potential risk, and so that is definitely being looked into. And the other was to do with journal transfers, which are sort of internal moving of money around within the organisation rather than anything that results in cash leaving the organisation. And EY's preference would be that our financial system had a control process for these transactions. It doesn't have a control process for these transactions, and we are comfortable that we've got retrospective controls in place that mitigate the need for that control. But none of those issues related specifically to anything to do with external spend or contracts or procurement.
Very much. Just a couple of questions. Really just to have it reconfirmed that all of the statutorily required changes have been, I think you said this, but just to have been incorporated into the new processes and procedures. And the second one was to do with the changes that have been brought in. Which, in your view, are the most challenging or time-consuming or costly to follow? So we get a sense of where perhaps the bigger changes have been made. Thank you.
So the first question, yes, these have been looked at and amended by both the procurement team and by my contracts and procurement team. So we're confident that all the changes brought about by the new Act have been incorporated. In terms of then the impacts of them, or the practical impacts, in some ways, I mean, the government set out to try and make the procurement regime simpler through this. It's a question whether that will be the case. Probably the biggest factor in practice that will potentially lead to us needing to do more work around procurements is in notices. There's a huge requirement in the new regime to publish far more notices than there was under the old regime. So it's an aim to create transparency from one end of the contract life cycle to the other end, which is laudable, I think, and will increase transparency. But with that comes an additional burden of lots of notices, both at the outset of award of a contract and then throughout its life cycle, need to be published and published on portals that are then, you know, fully available to the market. So I think that will lead to some increases in burden and work for us. The changes then to the procurement processes themselves, I think, do give a degree more flexibility in some respects, but don't fundamentally alter the things we'll need to do before awarding a contract.
Just if I could come back, would you anticipate that the increased number of notices and presumably places that notices are made available would see an increase in the number of people putting in bids and offers for things that we're seeking to procure? In other words, do you sense there's been a gap of we think, well, actually, do you know what, we might have got a bit more if we'd have done that, and oh, this might be quite useful in that sense?
It's possible, and certainly an aim of this is to try and encourage greater participation, particularly by SMEs. So it is possible we'll have greater visibility on contracts that are coming up for award, and therefore more interest and more bids. But I mean, you know, time will tell, really. We'll see.
I think that's hugely important, because the more SMEs that we can get involved and engaged in procuring, in offering services to public bodies, will encourage hopefully some innovation and entrepreneurship, which may provide better services for better value services. So that, I think, I'd like to hope would be a good one. Thank you.
Members, any more? David?
I'd just make the point that I think there's somewhere in the paper that says there's no equality aspects to this, but it seems from what I'm hearing that there are some positive ones. If it means that a greater number of businesses and potential businesses have got access to the procurement processes and can tender, then that's a positive thing, which I think we should all support.
Good point. Good point. Any more? No? Paul, thank you. And we can speak later about substitutes, please. Okay, so moving on then to the next item. Oh, sorry, recommendation. The recommendation is that the updated contract standing orders at Appendix 1 be approved by the full authority for inclusion in the Constitution. Agreed? Agreed? Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 9, which is to resolve that the public be excluded from the meeting during the following items of business, as it is likely, in view of the nature of the business to be transacted or the nature of the proceedings, that if members of the public were present during these items, there would be disclosure to them of exempt information within paragraph 3 Part 1 of Schedule 12A to the Local Government Act 1972, and further that in all circumstances in the case the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information for the reasons set out in the report. Members, do I have your permission to close the meeting? Okay. Thank you. All those who are not entitled to stay,